Hello there, dear traveler in the quiet hours. How are you feeling tonight? And where, I wonder, are you listening from? Are you nestled under warm covers, perhaps with a cup of tea still warm on the bedside table? Or maybe you're lying still in the hush of early dawn, letting your thoughts wander just enough to drift toward sleep? However you've arrived here, welcome. You found Mistrit, a resting place for tired minds, where history is not a list of battles or dates, but a soft and endless river of moments, vivid, slow, and soothing. If you find comfort in long-forgotten stories, if you enjoy drifting into sleep while hearing the hum of ancient days, then do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel, and clicking that gentle little bell, not to awaken you, but to ensure you'll return again to other quiet timelines. Let your shoulders relax now. Let your hands rest loosely beside you. Breathe in slowly and breathe out even slower. Inhale once more. Feel your body soften. Let the day that has passed melt into stillness. Because tonight, your soul is going somewhere far, not through movement, but through memory, not through facts, but through feeling. You are about to travel to a place warm with sun, brushed with gold, and humming with time. You are about to become someone else entirely. Your name is not important, not now. Tonight, you are Pharaoh, not just a king, but the living god of a vast and mysterious land. Your skin is darkened by the sun. Your limbs are strong from chariot rides and ceremonial processions. Your eyes are lined with kohl to protect from glare and spirit alike. But more than all that, your presence is sacred. You are not a person, you are a symbol, chosen by the heavens, the beating heart of Kemet, the Black Land, where the Nile brings life and the desert brings death. The world awaits you each morning as it waits for the sun. The scribes have your proclamations ready. The temples light their first incense when you stir. And the people, thousands and thousands of them, dream under the night sky knowing you will rise with Ra in the east once again. But you're not in a hurry. Not here. Not now. You are reclining on a bed woven from reeds and draped in the finest white linen. A slight breeze drifting in through an open stone-framed window, carrying with it the scent of frankincense and crushed lotus. A single oil lamp flickers beside you. Somewhere outside your chamber, a bird coos softly in the garden, and the rustle of palm fronds plays against the hush of twilight. Your eyelids are heavy, but not with fatigue, with peace. The peace of knowing that everything, for now, is in its place. Let's begin your day, or end it, or live it slowly, moment by moment, until you sleep. Let time blur. Let history dissolve into imagery and sensation. Let go of knowledge. Hold on to presence. Your chamber is quiet and vast, its walls painted with golden stars and scenes from the Book of the Dead. Not as a fearsome omen, but a promise. You will never truly die. Not you. Even if your name is carved in stone and your body embalmed beneath layers of resin and linen, your soul, the Ka, will rise and rest in the field of reeds. But not tonight. Tonight, you are alive. You are warm, and you are still. You shift under linen sheets and stare at the ceiling. The same stars you see above mirrored in the painting above your head. The patterns are familiar, comforting. Everything here is made to comfort you. A servant sits quietly in the corner, eyes downcast, waiting for the small ring of your bell. But you do not summon him. Not yet. You're listening. Listening to the pulse of your empire in the silence of your bones. Beyond this room, the palace slumbers. Somewhere down a long columned corridor, guards in leopard skins patrol slowly, their sandals whispering across polished stone. Cats roam the courtyard freely, sacred and sleek. The air outside is thick with the memory of day, sun-baked stone, trampled grass, water lifted by the shadow from the canal to the thirsty earth. In the village nearby, peasants lie asleep on the rooftops of their mud brick homes, cooled by the night air, dreaming of the harvest. They do not know you, but they speak your name when they offer thanks. They sing of your glory in work songs as they reap the fields. You are a distant star to them, a name that means rain, sun, grain, and order. You're their shelter from chaos. And though they never touch your hand, their lives move because you say they may. But you are just a man, aren't you? Your mouth is dry. You want water. You feel the ache in your legs from yesterday's ritual kneeling in the temple. You remember your mother's lullabies. You think of your children's laughter, echoing faintly from the harem quarters as they played in the sand garden under the sycamore. You are Pharaoh, but you are still human, and that is the secret no monument ever tells. That the man beneath the headdress yawns sometimes. That he feared illness, loved music, and watched the sky for omens not just for the land, but for his own restless heart. You turn now, slowly, carefully. You rise from your bed, the sheets slipping from your shoulder. You pad across the stone floor, bare feet cold against the surface. A soft robe of woven flax is handed to you by the attendant, still silent. The cloth is smooth, smelling faintly of lavender. You walk to the balcony and stand, arms resting on the ledge. Before you stretches the Nile, dark, infinite, glistening under the sliver of moon. You can smell it, that sweet, metallic, earthen smell, the breath of a nation. It winds south to north, from the lotus bloom to the papyrus stem, just like your crown, the two lands united in your brow. You inhale deeply, exhale slowly, and your mind drifts. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like to rule, yet long for quiet? Have you ever felt both infinite and small at once? That is what it means to be Pharaoh. Your hands, strong, ringed with gold, hold a nation's weight. But your heart, tonight, is soft. Sleep is near. You glance down at the gardens below, shadows of fig trees, pools reflecting torchlight, marble benches that catch the gleam of the moon. You once courted your queen in those gardens, when your beard was still black, before the wars, before the floods that broke the granaries and tested your faith. You loved her laughter. You still do. Somewhere, she sleeps now too. The scent of henna on her fingers. The sound of anklets shifting in the sheets. You return to bed, not as a ruler, not as a god, but as a man who needs sleep. You lie on your side. The sheets are cool, and your cat has returned to nest in the crook of your knee. Her purring is a lullaby of its own. The oil lamp flickers lower now, the flame bending like a reed in the wind. You close your eyes, and time slows. You do not know what hour it is. That does not matter. There is no time here. Only breath, only warmth, only silence. The scent of incense lingers in the room, sacred, old, steady. And far beyond the palace, beyond the river, beyond even the stars above the painted ceiling, the world turns. But you're still, and safe, and slowly, you sleep. The morning begins before the sky has yet turned from purple to gold, and the palace hums with the barely audible stirrings of life hidden within stone. Servants move silently through torchlit corridors, the shuffle of sandals muffled against rush matting, while the air is cool, almost cool enough to make your skin rise in goose flesh, if not for the weight of your station warming you from within. You are Pharaoh, and even the chill of dawn waits respectfully outside your chambers. You remain still in your bed for a moment longer, eyes half open beneath the golden canopy embroidered with hawks in flight, the shadows dancing faintly across the ceiling as if the gods above are already stretching their limbs to greet the day. There is a deep quiet to these hours, not empty silence, but the full-bodied quiet of expectancy, a pregnant pause before the rituals and duties begin, a hush that belongs to royalty, to eternity, to the wide, unbroken desert that wraps your world in its ochre arms. A gentle knock. Then the wooden doors open with ceremonial slowness, and your chamber is bathed in the faintest trace of morning light, filtering through carved shutters. Light not bright or harsh, but softly diffused through linen, through palm frond screens, through the incense smoke already wafting from the bronze burner held by your priest servant, who bows so low his forehead nearly touches the stone. The scent is unmistakable, kiffy, rich and warm, with notes of wine and honey, juniper, myrrh, and cinnamon, a blend older than memory, steeped in divine association, burned not to mask odor, but to invite presence, to make sacred the air around your waking body. Another servant steps forward with a copper bowl, water glistening like morning dew, and you extend your hands, feeling the coolness pour over your fingers, the droplets racing across your palms and down into the drainage channel carved discreetly into the floor. The same ritual performed every morning since your coronation, perhaps even before you were born, in those shadowy days when you were still merely a prince, learning to walk in sandals too large and watching your father receive the same honors. You are robed gently, layer by layer. The fine linen is smoothed over your skin with care, never rushed, never casual, for the garments you wear are not mere clothing, but symbols drawn from millennia. The pleated kilt, the pectoral collar with inlaid lapis and turquoise, the broad golden bracelets shaped like coiled cobras, the Neem's headdress whose striped silk flows over your shoulders like the river itself. Each piece is placed as if your body is a sacred altar, and indeed it is, for you are not just a ruler, but a living god, the son of Ra, the inheritor of Osiris, the one whose breath is law, whose gaze calms floods and ensures the rising of the sun. You step forward at last, into sandals carved from leather imported from Nubia, their soles padded with papyrus fiber, and your first steps of the day echo with practiced elegance on the stone floor. Not too quick, not too slow, a measured rhythm, regal without arrogance, effortless and yet deliberate, like the movement of the celestial bodies whose balance you are sworn to uphold. Your guards await outside your chamber, tall men in feathered helmets and linen kilts, armed but not threatening, their spears upright, their eyes never quite meeting yours unless invited. And with a quiet gesture you lead them down the corridor, past painted walls that shimmer with ancient stories. Horus slaying Set, you defeating enemies with a curved sickle sword, offerings piled high before Anubis and Hathor, scenes that pulse faintly in the light of morning torches. As you pass, one cannot help but feel that the figures on the walls are watching, nodding, breathing in unison with your own breath. You enter the purification room, a space of cool stone and murmured chants, where priests greet you with hands pressed to their chests, their heads shaved smooth, their robes spotless. They anoint your forehead with sacred oil, a drop only, but the sensation is precise, grounding, and recite blessings in slow tones that harmonize with the clink of ceremonial instruments, the rattle of the sistrum, the low vibration of the manat beads. They speak not just to you, but through you, invoking not only your name, but the deeper name you carry, the throne name, the one spoken only in temple shadows, guarded by secrecy and echoed in eternity. You do not speak, you simply breathe and feel the weight of that name settle on your shoulders like the crown itself. Then you proceed through the west gate of the palace, out into the colonnade, where the sun is finally rising in earnest. It floods the courtyard with light, warm and golden, striking the stone columns so that they seem to awaken, their carved lotus capitals opening not just in form, but in spirit. The first rays are met with drums, with flutes, with a chorus of voices chanting an ancient cadence as the high priest of Ammonius approaches, bearing a small figurine of the god, wrapped in linen, crowned with feathers and the solar disk, and you nod in reverence, touching the statue with your right hand, then your forehead, in a gesture passed from generations of kings to their sons, from flesh to spirit and back again. A tray is brought to you, not silver, but burnished bronze, bearing simple offerings: dates, figs, a wedge of bread, a small ceramic cup of honeyed beer. And as you eat slowly, savoring each bite as if it is the first meal ever taken on earth, you gaze toward the Nile in the distance, its surface rippling faintly in the morning wind, its banks alive with movement already. Fishermen casting nets, farmers steering oxen toward plows, children running barefoot along the silted edges. You will bless the river today, or perhaps inspect the granaries, or walk through the artisan district where the masons are shaping your tomb's next chamber. But that is later. For now, you remain still, chewing the soft sweetness of the date and feeling the pulse of Egypt in the soles of your feet. Every direction radiates with purpose. North, the temples of Heliopolis; south, the rich gold mines of Nubia; east, the rising sun and foreign lands beyond; west, the realm of the dead, the necropolis where your ancestors wait. All of it belongs to you, and yet you do not claim it loudly. You hold it as a shepherd holds his staff, as the Nile holds the sky, gently, eternally, in rhythm with a truth deeper than kingship. The day has begun, but not with haste. In this land, time does not rush. It flows like ink on papyrus, like water lifted from a well, like thought winding slowly through the halls of the mind before settling into silence. You take one more bite of fig, and somewhere, far away, a temple bell chimes 3 times, and the world moves forward quietly with you at its center. You walk now through the inner halls of the palace, a structure not built in a day or even a decade, but layered over generations like sediment left by the Nile, its very stones murmuring the voices of ancestors whose names are still carved on door lintels, whose deeds are depicted on fading murals, and whose shadows, if one watches long, enough in the quiet between heartbeats, might still be seen lingering near the thresholds of memory. The corridor is long and cool, the air touched with the scent of stone warmed by yesterday's sun, the kind of warmth that never truly fades, only settles deeper into the walls, radiating comfort and command in equal measure, and your fingers trail gently along the smooth plaster as you pass, brushing ever so lightly against hieroglyphs that sing praise to you in eternal script, cartouches enclosing your royal names, affirming you as chosen of Ra, beloved of Mot, ruler of the 2 lands, and protector of balance. You move slowly, deliberately, not out of fatigue, but because each step holds meaning. Every gesture, every breath is watched, recorded, mimicked, even if only in silence by the eyes of guards who bow their heads as you pass, by scribes hunched over scrolls, pausing mid-word, and by attendants kneeling beside decorative fountains with arms laden with folded linens, all of them part of the vast choreography that sustains this palace, this kingdom, this mythic world. The walls of the corridor are lined with scenes, not merely decorative, but alive with narrative. The raising of obelisks, the taming of lions, the weighing of the heart, each painted figure captured mid-movement, each eye outlined in black, as if they have only paused their gaze momentarily to let you pass. Above you, the ceiling stretches with blue paint deep as twilight, scattered with golden stars in precise constellation, as though to remind you that the divine sky does not wait beyond the palace roof, but accompanies you always overhead. You reach the vestibule now, where 2 massive statues flank the arched entry to the audience court. They are likenesses of you, of course, in polished black granite, their faces serene, lips still, eyes gazing out into eternity, not with vanity, but with inevitability. For this is the custom, the tradition, the truth. The Pharaoh is not a moment, but a monument. Beyond the statues lies the grand court, and you pause here, letting your presence be felt before it is seen, as priests and officials gather below, awaiting the morning audience. Their voices are low, murmuring petitions and reports, scrolls clutched in their arms, heads bowed beneath elaborate wigs, and perfumed cones of wax that slowly melt in the heat, releasing delicate fragrances of myrtle and lotus. You stand tall, shoulders relaxed, hands at your sides, and step forward in the sunlight, golden and clean as it floods the court from above, illuminating you as if the very sky acknowledges your arrival. The hush that follows is complete, profound, not fearful, but reverent, like the pause in music before the next gentle note. You make your way to the dais, the soles of your sandals kissing the stone with soft precision. And when you reach the throne, not just a seat, but a symbol carved of ebony and ivory, inlaid with gold, shaped with lions and lotus. You lower yourself with a fluid motion, becoming still, becoming central, becoming the eye of the world. The vizier steps forward, robe dragging like a scroll unrolling across the floor, and he begins to speak. News from the southern border, grain tallies from the delta, progress on the new canal project, all offered in the careful tones of one who understands that words spoken in your presence become record, become law, become legend. You listen, not just with your ears, but with your stillness, nodding slightly, asking a quiet question here, gesturing for clarification there, and all around you the court breathes in rhythms synchronized to your silence, waiting for your response as the world waits for the floodwaters, patient, attentive, reverent. A priest from Karnak presents an offering of white doves, their feathers immaculate, held in a woven cage of palm. A delegation from Byblos brings cedarwood and alabaster jars etched with blessings. A scribe offers you a scroll of dreams interpreted from a temple oracle, the glyphs precise and straight, drawn with care in black and red. You accept these things with the slow grace of someone who knows they are not gifts for the man, but for the station, for the divinity you represent, for the cosmic balance you preserve, for the ancient truth that you're not merely sitting, but reigning. And as the sun rises higher in the sky, casting the pillars around you into sharp contrast and drawing light patterns across the polished floor, you begin to speak, your voice soft but unyielding, as steady as stone shaped by centuries, as warm as the desert wind curling over limestone. You speak of order, of the harvest, of a need for just weights and measures in the granaries, of fairness in tax collection, of protection for temple lands, of gratitude for the river's rise and vigilance against bandits from the west. Your words are received not just by the ears of those present, but by the hearts of all who will hear of them, for your decrees will be carved in steel, etched in ink, whispered in marketplaces, and remembered in songs sung by oarsmen guiding grain boats. Through narrow canals, you finish not with a flourish, but with a silence, a pause that settles like dust in golden light, and in that stillness the court bows, not in panic, not in awe, but in deep, familiar recognition. You are Pharaoh, and the morning has now begun. As you rise, they disperse like petals in the wind, and you descend from the throne to a side passage, slipping away not in secrecy, but in serenity, followed only by a few chosen attendants and the faithful echo of sandal against stone. The passage opens into a small garden courtyard tucked within the palace walls, shaded by sycamores and tamarisks, where papyrus grows in shallow basins and birds flutter in quiet delight. And here you pause, not to rule, not to plan, but to breathe. A servant places a simple stool near the pool, and you sit, cupping water in your palm, letting it slip through your fingers, watching the ripples dance outward in widening circles, a perfect mirror of time itself. You close your eyes for a moment. The scent of blooming henna rises with the breeze. You hear laughter from a nearby window, the sound of your youngest son, perhaps, playing with painted wooden animals. A gardener hums a melody older than writing. In this brief space between duty and devotion, you simply exist, and that is enough. The palace stretches around you, vast and eternal. But in this garden, you are not a statue, not a symbol, not even a god. You are a heartbeat, steady and warm, in rhythm with the land that lives because you do. The afternoon light in Egypt is a particular kind of gold, softened not by clouds but by dust. Ancient dust, risen from the sandals of priests and farmers, lifted by the wind from crumbling tombs and distant fields, carried along the Nile from the southern cataracts to the fertile delta, so that each ray of sun seems wrapped in memory. This light pours across the courtyard now, across the rows of whitewashed columns and onto the polished flagstones where you, Pharaoh, are now walking slowly beneath the shade of carved papyrus capitals. Your eyes calm and half-lidded, your pace steady and untroubled, for there is no need to rush when the land itself keeps time by your breath. The attendants walk behind you at a respectful distance, silent save for the occasional shuffle of cloth or a faint jingle of beadwork as a bracelet settles back into place. The sounds of the court fade behind you. The petitioners dismiss for now. The scribes return to their alcoves, the vizier gone to prepare the next scroll of temple correspondence. And you move deeper into the palace, into the spaces less formal and more inward, the places where the outer world's clamor cannot quite reach. You enter the Hall of Offerings, a room not grand in scale, but intimate in presence, where the walls are dark with incense smoke, and the air carries a warmth not from the sun, but from ritual. This is where items brought to you from across the two lands are inspected, blessed, and placed with reverence. And here you linger, as you often do in the quieter hours, not to judge or command, but to observe, to reflect, to be reminded of the wider body of Egypt whose heartbeat pulses beneath your feet. Tables of alabaster and cedar hold baskets of offerings. Ivory from the southern frontier, lapis lazuli from faraway mines in what the scribes call the mountains of Kush, linen from Akhmim woven with astonishing fineness, pomegranates still fragrant with juice, date wine in clay amphorae sealed with beeswax and stamped with your name, and carved figures of falcons, cats, and sacred bulls. Each object an echo of the world beyond these palace walls, a world that labors and worships and thrives. Because you live. You let your fingers brush the rim of a bowl filled with barley. Feel the cool press of the grain against your skin. Imagine the hands that planted, watered, reaped, and winnowed it. The long lines of workers bent over fields, their laughter, their sweat, their hopes whispered to the wind between stalks. It is not pity that fills you, nor pride, but a gentle awareness, a kind of reverent responsibility. For though you are Pharaoh and stand apart, your soul is bound to theirs in an invisible thread woven by Mot, the divine balance that holds the universe in place, that names the Nile's rhythm sacred, that causes the stars to rise and the fields to yield grain. As the offering priest approaches, he bows low and murmurs the names of the items placed before you. His voice is soft, rhythmic, a chant without melody. And you listen not for content, but for cadence, for the way the words hang in the still air like woven linen. Ancient syllables, known to your father and your father's father, and to the generations who built the kingdom from reeds and firelight and dreams. When he finishes, you offer a slow nod, and he retreats backward, never turning his back to you, never lifting his gaze above your chest. The chamber's shadows sway as a breeze stirs the incense smoke, creating small spirals that dance and vanish. And for a moment, you simply breathe, the scent of resin and dried herbs wrapping itself around your awareness like a shawl. You turn now and leave the room, passing through a narrow archway into a smaller corridor that leads toward the palace's southern wing, where the private sanctuaries of your household lie. And as you move through these dimmer halls, the air shifts again, less ceremonial now, more personal, filled with scents of jasmine oil, baked flatbread, laundered linen drying in the heat. You reach a doorway and pause. There is no announcement, no trumpet, only the gentle creak of the wooden hinge as you push it open and step inside. It is a domestic space reserved for your children. Here the walls are lower, the windows wider, and soft rugs cover the floors where tiny sandaled feet run and skip, where toys carved from ebony and painted with cheerful colors lie scattered beside clay dolls and carved hippopotamuses. One of your daughters looks up from a low bench, where she is weaving colored threads into a braid, and her face lights up, not with fear or formality, but with joy, and she leaps to her feet and runs to you, throwing her arms around your waist, her giggle like birdsong. You place your hand on her head and smile, the kind of smile no courtier sees, no statue will capture, the smile of a father, of a man who remembers a simpler time before crowns and commands. Another child joins her, a boy, your youngest, and he holds out a papyrus scroll scribbled with drawings, a sun with a face, a crocodile with human legs, a clumsy rendering of what might be you atop a chariot. And you take it solemnly, praising his work, pretending not to notice the ink stain on your own fingers as he points out the parts he likes best. You sit with them for a while, time forgotten, your back leaning against a smooth wall as the breeze from the open window stirs their hair, and you watch them laugh, argue, explain, imagine. They ask you questions. What do stars eat? How does the river know when to rise? Do cats dream? You answer with stories. Stories of gods and monsters, of stars that fell in love with mountains, of the lion-headed goddess who drank a lake of beer to calm her fury. Their eyes grow wide, their worlds grow larger, and you feel, just faintly, that this is the truest magic of all, to create wonder where there was none, to be the bridge between what is and what might be. A servant brings dates and bread, and you break pieces for them, letting the crumbs fall where they may, unconcerned for ceremony, content in this small moment, as sacred in its way as any temple rite. Eventually, their eyes grow heavy, and one by one, they drift to sleep, curled on cushions or nestled beside woven dolls, and you stand again, drawing the curtains softly closed behind you as you leave. Outside, the corridor is dimming with the angle of the sun, and lamps are being lit one by young pages who move with cautious grace, each flame trembling into life beneath their cupped hands. You return to your private quarters for a brief respite, letting the silence soak into your skin, listening to the distant murmur of the palace settling into its evening rhythm. The throne may await again, and the priesthood may summon you to witness the sun's descent with ritual words and offerings. But for now, for this moment, you are simply yourself, a soul in a room, surrounded by stone and time, breathing slowly in a world so ancient it barely remembers when it began, and so eternal it does not fear when it will end. The sun, though still above the horizon, has begun its long exhale toward dusk, and the quality of light that slips through the palace latticework is changing softer, more amber, casting elongated shadows along the smooth stone floors, and turning the painted reliefs on the walls into something half-dreamed, half-remembered. Even the golden inlays seem less like reflections of the sun and more like their own quiet glow, as though the gods have lit small fires behind the walls to warm the coming evening. Your steps are unhurried as you leave your quarters once more, the air around you touched now with the faint scent of roasted garlic, coriander, and cumin, drifting in from the distant kitchens where dinner is being prepared not just for you, but for every level of life within the palace, from the scribes who sharpen their reed pens by window light, to the water carriers who have not stopped walking since the second hour of the day. A servant approaches, hands clasped over a folded linen napkin, and he informs you that your bath is ready. You nod gently, a subtle motion that somehow carries centuries of custom, and he turns on his heel to lead the way down a western corridor, one seldom used by officials, reserved instead for the intimate rituals of cleanliness and calm. The bathing chamber is an oasis within an oasis. Its walls smooth and undecorated, curve in a quiet geometry, designed to hold sound and stillness alike. The floor beneath your feet is tiled in faience, a deep turquoise green that mimics the sacred waters of the Nile, and the air is thick with steam that clings to the arches like silk. Servants wait there already, silent and still as statues, beside large ceramic basins steaming with scented water, a blend of blue lotus, crushed mint, rose oil, and something deeper, more ancient, the resinous tang of desert myrrh. You remove your royal linens without ceremony, for here, in this space, you are allowed a kind of vulnerability, a soft erasure of grandeur, not to diminish your divinity, but to cleanse it, as R.A. bathes in the underworld during his nightly journey. So must you renew the physical vessel that houses the divine. One step into the water, and the warmth envelopes you, not with heat, but with presence. A kind of gentle gravity pulling every tightness from your body, every tension from your joints, every lingering thought from your mind. You settle slowly into the sunken pool, carve into the floor from alabaster smooth as river-worn stone, and the sound of water lapping against the basin's edges is the only music you need. Hands, trained and reverent, pour water over your shoulders, over your crown, letting it run like time over your skin. A clay jar of natron is opened, and the fine salty powder is mixed with perfumed oils and massaged across your chest, your back, your arms. Not scrubbed in haste, but stroked in long, slow circles, each motion syncing with your breathing until you're no longer certain where your body ends and the warmth begins. Your eyelids drift closed. The scent of the blue lotus deepens. You imagine the same flower opening in the marshes by the riverbank as a child, its petals slick with dew and insects, its center a deep pool of mystery, a favorite symbol in your temples, because it opens with the sun and closes with the night, just like your people, just like your rain. You stay like this for some time, minutes or longer, doesn't matter. And when the final rinsing comes, you feel almost as though the layers of the day have been shed like papyrus bark, leaving behind a smoother, quieter self. Linen towels, thick and soft, are offered to you, and you step out of the basin with the grace of one who knows that the floor beneath them will always be steady. You're not cold. The warmth of the water has rooted itself deep within you, and as your skin is dried, perfumed with sandalwood and cardamom, and redressed in fresh, loosely draped linen, far simpler than your ceremonial attire, you feel not like a king stepping back at a duty, but like a man returning to his center. Outside the bathing chamber, the halls are quieter now. The hustle of petitioners and priests has faded into an evening lull. You make your way to a small antechamber near the temple wing, a place where prayers are written by hand, where tiny offerings are left not for public ceremony, but for private devotion. The flicker of small oil lamps dances along the low walls, where hundreds of tiny inscriptions have been carved. Not grand declarations of victory or royal decree, but small lines of verse, fragments of psalms, names of ancestors too humble for tombs, but too loved to forget. You kneel there, not as Pharaoh, not as the incarnation of Horus, but as a soul among souls, and press your fingers lightly to one of the older carvings, barely legible now, weathered by time and smoke and the brushing hands of generations. You do not read it aloud. You simply breathe it in. This is the heart of Egypt, not just palaces and pyramids, but devotion, memory, continuity. After a while, you rise, moving now toward the western balcony, where the sun has begun its final descent. The light slants across the city, catching rooftops and domes, making the river gleam like molten copper, winding its way through a cradle of reeds and reeds and reeds, always the reeds. You stand there for a long time, your arms folded gently before you, your gaze not fixed on anything in particular, just the rhythm of the world moving without hurry, without interruption. The boats returning to dock, the workers beginning their evening songs, the temple bells chiming in distant tones that echo off stone like the memory of thunder. Someone brings you a warm drink, a barley infusion spiced with cinnamon and sweetened with date syrup, and you sip it slowly, feeling the heat travel down into your chest and settle there like a small sun. Below, the sacred lake reflects the orange of the sky, and on its banks the herons begin to gather, slow and tall, stepping through the water with infinite patience. This is the hour between, not yet night, no longer day, and you too feel suspended between things, between divinity and humanity, between ceremony and solitude, between memory and dream. The breeze rises slightly, ruffling the hem of your linen robe, carrying with it the scent of baked earth cooling at last, of papyrus sap, of distant tamarisk trees. Somewhere behind you, a musician begins to play a harp, its notes so delicate, so spare, that they seem to come not from strings, but from the space between stars. You close your eyes and simply listen. You do not need to speak. You do not need to move. You are still. The world turns, and you turn with it, not as a wheel, but as the quiet center around which all things revolve in gentle, measured silence. Evening in the palace descends not with haste, but with ceremony woven so finely into the fabric of daily life that it feels less like a ritual and more like a sigh. A long, collective breath drawn by every wall, every column, every polished vessel reflecting the dwindling light. The torches are lit in order, one by one, in a practiced rhythm, beginning at the east gates and flowing inward like a tide of flame. The torchbearers moving with soft footsteps and downcast eyes, their movements, mirrored across centuries of dusk fall, while you, Pharaoh, recline upon a cushioned dais in your private sanctuary, arms loosely draped at your sides, feeling the air cool against the warm skin of your forearms and neck where the sun had lingered last. The sky through the high lattice screens is deepening from gold to indigo, with the first pinpricks of stars making their quiet debut overhead, not yet bright, but promising. And as always, the stars seem to hang closer over Egypt than elsewhere, as though even the heavens lean near to hear your breath, your thoughts, your memories. An attendant approaches without speaking, kneels, and offers a bronze basin of cool water, the surface still and clear as a mirror. You dip your fingers in, and for a moment, the ripple you create feels as though it echoes out to the edge of the world. You think of your ancestors, the long line of pharaohs whose names are carved into stele, whose bodies lie beneath massive stone vaults surrounded by sacred texts and protective amulets. Each of them once seated, just as you are now, breathing this same air, seeing this same light as it falls across stone, across fig trees in the courtyard, across the ever-slipping current of the Nile. The sense of continuity is not heavy, not a burden, but a comfort, like a long linen robe that has been passed down, softened by use, still fragrant with ancient myrrh. A scribe enters now, summoned by silent signal, and he bows deeply before presenting a small stack of scrolls, reports, poems, correspondence from other lands, inventories of offerings delivered to the great temple at Karnak. And he begins to read, his voice low and even, never hurried, each word pronounced with reverence for the ink and reed that gave it life. The words flow over you like water. The priests of Thoth request additional acacia resin for embalming rites. The foreman at Deir el-Medina sends word of progress in a new tomb painting, requesting more red ochre and time before the inundation. A Hittite envoy has sent a gift of silver and a carved ivory lion, with promises of peace in his king's name. You nod occasionally, your mind absorbing details like sand drawing in the tide, while your gaze drifts toward a small polished table near the dais where a bowl of pomegranates sits in the lamplight, their thick skins glowing like rubies, their perfume faint but sweet. Behind the scribe, a second servant arrives with a box of scrolls marked not for rulership, but for reflection, wisdom texts, teachings from older dynasties, hymns to the gods, dreams once recorded by seers and left preserved in temple libraries, and you request one at random. The scribe unfurls it with practiced fingers and begins again, his voice shifting into a slower cadence, shaped by the language of metaphor and myth. Be patient as the crocodile that waits beneath the papyrus. Act with the stillness of the moon. You close your eyes as the words unfold, images rising within you. A crocodile resting unseen, unmoving, beneath green stalks on the riverbank. The pale disk of the moon reflecting in a dark canal. These teachings are older than you, older than any kingdom, but they find you still in the quiet of evening, like a familiar hand resting gently on your shoulder. You do not rush the reading. There is no schedule now, no bell to summon you, only the softness of time opening outward like a blossom. When the reading ends, you raise a hand slightly, and the scribe withdraws, taking the scrolls with him, bowing again at the threshold. You rise now, your steps slow, deliberate, moving toward the outer chamber where the evening meal has been arranged. Not a feast, not tonight, but a modest selection of your choosing, carefully prepared by cooks who know your taste without need for command. Flatbread warm from the clay oven, lentil stew rich with cumin and onion, steamed mulikia leaves with coriander, roasted duck glazed in date syrup, fresh figs, slices of melon, and a small goblet of honeyed beer served cool in an alabaster cup. You do not dine in silence. A harpist plays gently in the corner, her fingers barely brushing the strings, her eyes fixed on a point far away, as though playing not for you, but for the rhythm of the universe itself. And occasionally a temple singer joins her, murmuring old hymns to Hathor, goddess of joy and motherhood, her voice low enough to keep the shadows still. You eat slowly, thoughtfully, chewing each bite with attention, tasting the earth and the lentils, the smoke in the duck, the sweetness of the figs pressed between your tongue and the roof of your mouth, the tang of fermented barley in the beer. Every taste is ancient. Every texture connects you to the soil and sky. You remember stories told by elders that the gods once walked Egypt disguised as mortals, and perhaps they still do, sitting at unknown tables, tasting these same foods, savoring the gift of living in flesh. The meal ends without fanfare. A towel is offered, scented with mint and rose water. You cleanse your hands, your lips. You nod, and the servants vanish, leaving you once more in stillness. You make your way back to the western side of the palace, passing down a corridor lined with statues. Your ancestors again, captured in stone, in basalt and diorite, each of them holding the crook and flail, each of them looking forward into eternity, each of them both guiding and watching you. Their presence is not heavy. It is grounding. You pass them with neither fear nor pride, only the quiet knowledge that one day, you too will take your place among them, unmoving, unblinking, surrounded by the scent of incense and the prayers of descendants. You enter your private shrine, a small room lit only by two oil lamps and the glow of the setting sun through a narrow slit in the western wall. In the center of the room is a statue of Ammonius Ra, carved from ebony and gold, his features serene, his arms crossed in eternal gesture. You kneel, not as king, not as God on earth, but as soul before mystery. You offer a few words, not in formal chant, but in thought, in feeling, in breath, and you press your forehead to the cool stone of the floor. The room is utterly silent. Even the lamps do not flicker. And for a moment, you feel yourself dissolve, not vanish, but widen, as if your edges have become part of the air, as if the breath you draw is the same breath that moves through trees, through river reeds, through temple columns carved by hands long returned to dust. When you stand again, you do so slowly, and your limbs feel lighter, as if every moment of stillness has made you younger. You return to your quarters. The bed has been turned down. The linens are fresh, the pillows soft, the cat that sleeps at the foot of the bed already curled and purring. A brazier burns low in the corner, filling the air with a final whisper of sandalwood and cinnamon. You disrobe with care, folding the linen robe and placing it upon the stool beside your bed. You lie down slowly. Your body sighs into the bedding. You pull the sheet over your chest. And for a moment, you simply stare at the carved ceiling overhead, a field of stars painted in dark blue and gold, a copy of the sky just beyond the roof, a reminder that the world above and the world below are one. Your eyes begin to grow heavy. The room breathes with you. The night has arrived, not with trumpets, not with chariots, but with stillness, with warmth, with memory. You close your eyes. You are Pharaoh. You are at peace. The kingdom is quiet. The river flows. The stars turn overhead. And all is well. Night in ancient Egypt is not a thing of darkness, but of layered quiet. A softened hush that unfolds like linen sheets, wrapping the land in 1,000 textures of silence. And within the palace, this stillness is not absence, but presence, breathing into the colonnades and dim halls a rhythm as sacred as any daylight procession. Your body rests beneath embroidered linen, the scent of lotus oil still faint on your shoulders. Your limbs softened by warmth and stillness, your mind half lulled, but aware of the coolness of polished stone beneath the bed frame, of the muffled footsteps of guards changing post beyond the door, of the distant lowing of cattle in temple stalls being tended one last time by sleepy-eyed herdsmen, of the near-silent chirrup of geckos hiding between the crevices of the inner walls. Outside your chambers, the palace persists in slow, sacred labor even as you sleep. Scribes continue to transcribe temple records by the flickering light of tall oil lamps, their ink-stained fingers steady, their styluses tapping softly against the reed-thin margins of scrolls. Servants move through lower halls on bare feet, laying down reed mats for morning cleansing, placing fresh flowers in water basins, checking the storage rooms where amphorae of date wine and barley are kept sealed. Beneath cool stone ceilings, the palace never truly sleeps, just as the river never ceases to flow. And like the Nile, your kingdom's pulse moves even in shadow, a quiet tide of breath, labor, and reverence. The stars overhead shine steady and sharp, thousands of them visible in the dry sky, not flickering, but holding fast, arranged in ancient constellations your astronomer priests have studied and recorded for generations. Sa, the sacred hunter striding across the sky, his belt like 3 dots of fire. Sopdet, the dog star, whose yearly return foretells the flood, and Ra himself, sailing in his solar bark through the underworld's 12 gates, each hour marked by chants whispered by priests. In sanctuaries as narrow as coffins and filled with incense thicker than dreams. In the palace observatory, high above your sleeping quarters, a priest trained from childhood to count stars watches the horizon with calm patience, marking on clay tablets the precise angle of descent, the shifting of the moon's silver light, the slow crawl of time that will, when the day comes, inform when festivals are held, when tombs are aligned, when offerings are made. The mechanics of the heavens are not feared. They are followed, honored, mirrored, and so too is the body of Pharaoh, your own limbs kept in balance not just by rest, but by ritual. A servant enters your chamber now, soundless but sure, and checks the oil levels in the brazier, adding a pinch more cinnamon bark and one clove before retreating with a bow, never disturbing the air more than necessary, never speaking. Even in slumber, you are attended, not as a burden, but as a sacred duty. For to care for Pharaoh's rest is to tend the breath of the nation itself. In the outer courtyard, torchlight plays across painted pillars where guards stand at attention, their bodies straight, their spears upright, their eyes occasionally glancing skyward. They do not talk, they do not fidget, they do not forget that even under moonlight, the eyes of the gods may pass over them. Beneath the outer portico, the palace cats curl in sleep, ears twitching in dreams. They are honored not just as protectors against mice, but as manifestations of Batet, goddess of the hearth and the soft smile, their purring a quiet echo of the universe's steady hum. Somewhere beyond the palace walls, on the edge of the necropolis, temple priests in white linen chant the final verses of the day's prayers to Osiris, god of the dead, their voices rising in sonorous unison as incense trails skyward like the breath of the departed, winding its way into the deep, unseen places of the stars. Their chants are not meant to call back the dead. The dead need not be summoned, but to remind the living that life continues only through harmony, through ritual, through remembrance. Even the embalming chambers, far from the palace, are still active by lamplight, the sacred embalmers preparing another noble for passage, their hands slow, their gestures reverent, removing the lungs and liver not with haste, but with a gentleness that comes from knowing the body is not discarded but transformed. And their work, though unseen by you now, supports your rule just as surely as your chariots or your scribes. Within the palace walls, your household too has quieted. Your children sleep in clustered chambers nearby, their breaths rhythmic and soft, their dreams filled with painted boats and golden masks and stories you once told by oil lamp. And your queen lies curled beneath her own canopy of pleated linen and perfumed air, her features at peace, her hair braided with threads of lapis, her hands still faintly scented with the resin she rubbed between her palms before prayers. You too lie still, half dreaming, not of war or court or ceremony, but of smaller things, the warmth of the sun on polished stone, the feel of mud between bare toes from a boyhood walk along the canals, the steady thump of water wheels turning in time to oxen steps as women fill their jars at dawn. Your breathing deepens. Somewhere in your chest, you feel the slow thrum of memory not as a sharp picture, but as warmth, the heat of past lives glowing softly behind your ribs. The night deepens further. Outside the city, in small villages lit by rushed torches and the occasional flicker of fireflies, farmers doze near their ovens, potters sleep beside their kilns, shepherds lie curled near their dogs, and their dreams, too, are quiet and full of the same stars, the same sense of date palms and river wind. Occasionally, a bird calls out, or a palm frond rattles in the breeze, or a crocodile shifts in the reeds. But these sounds are not interruptions. They're the lullaby of Egypt herself, a living hush that has blanketed your people for thousands of years. In the granaries, mice rustle softly in the chaff. Temples continue to glow with sacred fire, and the moon begins its steady climb overhead, passing through cloudless sky in the same arc it has followed since time before kings. And you, still resting beneath your canopy of stars, still wrapped in fine linen and the scent of blue lotus, remain steady, your chest rising and falling, your breath a tide, your dreams aligning not just with memory, but with destiny. For you are not simply sleeping, you are existing at the center of a cosmos held together by ritual and order, and every sigh, every blink, every quiet turn beneath your coverlet is mirrored by the world outside, where even in night, the order of Egypt holds. Strong as limestone, quiet as air, sacred as breath. Dawn returns not with suddenness, but with subtlety, creeping first as a lightning of shadows along the palace walls, a soft gray bleeding into blue as the stars begin to loosen their hold on the night sky, and the coolness of the air shifts almost imperceptibly, the hush of the early morning settling like a woven shawl over every chamber, every courtyard, every rooftop of Thebes. And within your royal bedchamber, the earliest light passes. Through the slit windows high above, laying long horizontal bands of dusty gold across the tiled floor, stirring the cat at the foot of your bed and causing the blue-painted ceiling of stars to pale gently into lavender. You remain still, Pharaoh, lying beneath the linen canopy as the hush endures a moment longer, your chest rising slowly, your eyes fluttering open not from disturbance, but from the natural pull of time and rhythm, as though your body, attuned to the movement of Ra's chariot, senses that the solar bark is once again rising from the underworld to bathe the world in light. The soft scrape of sandals on polished stone tells you that your morning attendants are already in motion, careful not to speak until you stir, entering with water basins, clean robes, and fresh linen laid over their arms like sacred offerings. And as you rise, stretching with the deliberate calm of someone who has never once needed to rush, they move around you in a graceful orbit, washing your hands and face with warm water infused with crushed mint and basil, drying you gently with thick cotton towels, combing through your hair with narrow ivory picks, and anointing your shoulders with oil drawn from lotus petals pressed during the previous year's harvest. There is no need for words, for everything here is already known, every motion practiced 1,000 times, not mechanical but reverent, as though the care of your body were part of a wider ritual, not of vanity, but of cosmic necessity. You are Pharaoh, and the balance of the world begins with your breath. The robe chosen for today is of a lighter weave, ideal for the season's warmth, dyed the pale color of desert sands and hemmed in gold thread, and it slips over your skin with a whisper of linen that has been washed and beaten and softened until it folds like water. A collar is added, lapis and turquoise set in geometric bands, each stone polished to a shine that catches the morning light as it finally spills more boldly through the archway, filling the room with that unmistakable golden hue that only Egypt's sun can summon, ancient, bright, and gentle all at once. As your sandals are fastened, you allow yourself a long, measured breath, inhaling the scents of oil, fresh reed mats, incense embers from a nearby shrine still burning from the night's offerings, and the faintest aroma of baking bread from the palace kitchens. The first batch, always prepared before the rest of the city stirs. With no command, your attendants step aside, and you begin your walk through the inner corridor leading to the eastern courtyard, where the priests of Ra are already assembled in quiet ranks, their heads bowed, their white linen robes pristine, their hands raised in slow, open-palmed gesture as the first of the day's sunlight strikes the top of the temple's pylon. A moment sacred not just in ritual, but in presence, in sensation, in the way the very air seems to hold its breath before exhaling. With light, you step into that light, and the court bows and waves, not loudly, not with spectacle, but with reverence as the ceremony begins. The offering of prayers, the lifting of censers filled with resinous smoke, the soft drumming of palm fiber instruments that keeps time with the heartbeat of the kingdom itself. And you do not speak, for the gods do not need words from you, only your presence. Only your acknowledgement of the role you serve in the cycle that predates even memory. As the priests chant, their voices rising and falling like the current of the Nile itself, you approach the sacred flame and place your hands briefly above it, palms down, a silent gesture of blessing in return. For every new day given to you is also given back in kind to the gods, to the land, to the unseen forces that whisper beneath stone and wind and sky. The ceremony ends without proclamation, without applause, fading naturally like a dream into the routines that follow. And you turn and walk again through the colonnade, past papyrus-shaped columns whose capitals tower like blooming canopies overhead. Their paint faded from years of sun, but still vivid in the morning light. The ochres and blues and greens speaking the language of eternity. From the inner sanctum, your vizier greets you with a low bow, bearing scrolls tucked into a leather folio, and together you step into the hall of judgment, where scribes, recorders, and magistrates have gathered to present the day's petitions and decisions. Land disputes between neighboring farmers, a question of grain storage along the floodplain, reports of bandit sightings beyond the western escarpment, the progress of tomb construction in the Valley of the Kings, each matter presented. With clarity and bowed heads, as you listen with the serenity of a ruler who does not need to hurry, whose mind holds each detail not in fragments, but as a wide mosaic, layered and living. You respond with nods, with brief phrases shaped like verdicts. A decree to settle the boundary by the position of the last inundation. A directive to reinforce grain cellars with stone rather than reed. A message to be sent by fast boat to the commander of the garrison at Buhin to increase patrols. And as your words are recorded in ink, they become more than decisions. They become part of the living text of Egypt, inscribed not only on scrolls, but in memory, in daily life, in the small. Adjustments that ripple outward from this chamber like water touched by a reed. After the final scroll is sealed, the court disperses, and you retreat briefly to the garden courtyard for midday rest. The tiled path cool beneath your sandals. The shade of sycamores shifting gently in the breeze. Birds dipping into the stone basins carved for their use. Their wings scattering droplets that catch the light in a spray of gold and silver. And you sit upon a low stool, accepting a cup of barley water steeped with fig and tamarind, the rim of the cup cool against your lips. For a time, you simply watch. The movement of a gardener trimming wild basil, the flicker of a lizard slipping into the crack of a wall, the light shimmering on the fish that glide lazily in the pond. And you think not of treaties or temples, but of water, of roots, of the pulse that lives just beneath the surface of all things. You are Pharaoh, yes, but you are also of the land, not above it, but entwined with it, as its breath is your breath, and its silences mirror your own. When the sun reaches its highest point, you return to the inner halls for a quiet meal, eaten not in ceremony, but in contemplation. Lentils drizzled with herb oil, flatbread folded with grilled eggplant and garlic, honey cakes sprinkled with crushed sesame, each bite deliberate, each texture familiar, yet always satisfying in the way that only the simplest foods, prepared with care, can be. The harpist plays again from a nearby chamber, a single string, plucked every few heartbeats, a melody of stillness. And your fingers trace the grain of the wooden table beside you as your mind settles again into that low, calm rhythm that moves the hours forward, not with urgency, but with grace. As the midday light begins its gentle decline, The shadows along the inner walls of the palace grow longer and more deliberate, stretching like silent sentinels across the tiled floors. And the air within the royal precincts grows thick with a kind of golden stillness, not oppressive, but weighted, as though time itself has decided to rest for a while beneath the carved cornices and linen canopies of your domain. And you, Pharaoh, stepped once more into the sanctuary of your private library. A vaulted, cool room enclosed within walls of smooth, pale stone, insulated from the heat, lined from floor to ceiling with wooden niches filled with tightly rolled scrolls tied with colored twine or sealed with wax and embossed clay discs. Each one a whisper from the past, a law, a hymn, a spell, or a memory, the collective breath of your forebears bound in papyrus and pigment. You do not speak as you enter. Instead, you move with quiet familiarity to a low table where a selection of scrolls has already been arranged for you by your chief archivist, who bowed and withdrew before you arrived, understanding the sacred privacy of this hour. You sink onto the cushioned bench, the faint scent of aged parchment and cedar rising as you do, and you unroll one of the scrolls carefully, fingers moving with practiced ease, revealing neat columns of hieroglyphs inked with meticulous artistry, the symbols precise and unhurried. A treatise on the dreams of Pharaoh Snefru, copied long ago by temple scribes, its lines rich with metaphor and reflection, speaking of sacred pools, of birds that spoke in riddles, of statues that turned there, heads in twilight, and offered counsel to the restless. You trace the symbols slowly with your eyes, feeling not only the meaning they carry, but the calm they impose, each image a thought wrapped in silence, a soft rhythm to soothe the edges of your consciousness. The quiet here is complete, except for the occasional shift of linen as a breeze passes lightly through the high slits in the stone walls, fluttering a tapestry at your back, a woven image of the lotus and papyrus bound together, the eternal emblem of Upper and Lower Egypt. Unity and diversity, order and contrast. Occasionally, you pause in your reading, not out of confusion or distraction, but to allow the weight of the passage to settle fully in your thoughts, letting it unfold like the petals of a lily at dawn. You close the scroll and reach for another. This one older, its twine faded, its edges slightly brittle with age, and as you unroll it, a different scent rises, something faintly sweet and earthen, as though the fibers remember the marshes from which they were once pulled. This text is a catalog of offerings made during the reign of your grandfather, a simple accounting of grains, oils, incense, livestock, all marked with humble precision. And yet, as you scan the lists, you do not see numbers and goods, but a portrait of an age, a reflection of the daily pulse of devotion, what the people gave, what the temples received, what the gods were owed, and how the balance of the two lands was maintained through the generosity of both the humble and the high. You remember stories told to you as a child, of offerings prepared at dawn, of priests baking bread in silence, of acolytes tending sacred pools while speaking no words, their every gesture watched by ibis and heron alike. And as you read, you are reminded that these offerings were never simply payments, never bribes, but affirmations, declarations of faith and rhythm and season. Outside the library, the world hums on, but within, time seems suspended, the light filtering in with such softness that it feels like a veil drawn between you and the distractions of state. You reach for a final scroll, thicker than the rest, bound in red twine. A dream journal kept by a priest of Hathor some 60 years ago, filled with accounts of visions, nightly wanderings, and sacred messages received in sleep. The dreams are vivid. One speaks of a golden boat drifting across a sky of black water, another of a field of serpents whispering forgotten names, another of a statue weeping into a basin of milk. You read these not for prophecy, not for instruction, but for reflection, understanding that the dreams of your people, like the dreams of Pharaoh, are threads woven through the same divine loom, and that in these symbolic wanderings lie the truths that words too often fail to capture. You sit in that thought for some time, the scroll resting open in your lap, the sound of your breath the only thing stirring the air. Eventually, you rise, returning the scrolls to their arranged places, nodding once toward the doorway in acknowledgement of the archivist who will return after your departure to ensure every scroll is tied, dusted, and honored as it deserves. You exit the library and step into the inner garden, where the sun is now slanting westward and the foliage gleams with quiet light. Banana leaves trembling slightly in the wind, pomegranate trees heavy with fruit, bees moving from blossom to blossom in spiraling golden arcs. You stroll slowly, savoring the play of warmth on your skin, the sensation of loose earth beneath your sandals, the drifting perfume of jasmine and sweet acacia. Birds flutter among the branches, doves, bulbuls, the occasional iridescent kingfisher from the river, and their songs blend with the faint rustling of reeds planted along the reflecting pool, their long stalks bowing in unison as if in prayer. You pause beside a tall column of sandstone, wrapped in vines of flowering bougainvillea, and place your palm against its warm surface, feeling the texture of centuries in its face, not eroded, but softened, as if the stone remembers every sunset, every rainfall, every echo of prayer spoken within its shadow. It is in moments like these, unstructured, unspoken, that the weight of kingship feels most like a still pond, deep, placid, holding reflection but not drowning in responsibility. And you allow yourself, if only for a few moments, to think not of legacy or policy or ceremony, but of now, this air, this breath, this small moment of living within the vastness of eternity. A servant appears quietly behind you, bowing low, offering a simple clay cup of cooled water, scented with mint, and you accept it with a gentle nod, sipping slowly, each swallow refreshing not just your throat but your thoughts, your presence, your rootedness. The garden, like the library, is a place of renewal, not dramatic transformation, but slow remembering, a return to the core of being Pharaoh not as a title, but as a vessel of stillness, order, and care. The sun dips lower, and a bell sounds in the far hallway, a soft, musical chime marking the approach of late afternoon rituals. You begin your walk back, passing under carved archways where depictions of Horus and Thoth flank the lintels, their eyes ever watchful, their postures frozen mid-blessing, and the floor beneath you reflects their images in shallow pools of standing water left from a recent rinsing of the halls. There is peace in the repetition, the way the day unfolds not in chaos but in currents like the Nile, guided by invisible tides shaped long before your birth. And as you re-enter the inner sanctuary, the scent of incense grows stronger, frankincense this time, sharp and clean, preparing the air for evening prayers that will soon rise like smoke into the domed ceilings above, whispering once again the truths that only silence can hold. Evening returns as a kind of remembering, not a stark end to day, but a soft gathering of everything that came before it, a recollection in gold and shadow. And as the sun begins its descent behind the distant palm, fringed horizon, its amber light turns the stone corridors of your palace into vessels of warmth, the walls glowing with a temporary fire, reflecting their hues onto polished alabaster floors and the still surfaces of shallow pools filled with lotus blossoms and the occasional floating candle prepared for nightfall by silent hands. You, Pharaoh, move slowly through this radiant hush, every footstep a measured echo, your sandals brushing delicately against the smooth tiles in a rhythm that neither rushes nor delays, For this hour belongs to neither labor nor leisure. It is the hour of transition, the sacred in-between where day exhales and night inhales, and all who live within your court feel its stillness settle over them like a veil. In the private hall beyond the garden, acolytes from the Temple of Ma'at have prepared a small ceremony in honor of the cosmic balance. Not one of grand procession, but a quiet gesture of thanks, and you are greeted with reverent bows and offered a thin strip of gold leaf shaped into the feather of truth, which you hold in your palm for a breath, then place gently into the brazier, watching as the metal curls, darkens, and vanishes into ash and smoke. The incense here is heavy with meaning, a blend of blue lotus, cassia bark, and dried juniper berries, and it rises in thick spirals that twist upward toward the carved ceiling, where scenes of cosmic judgment and divine harmony look down in silent witness. The eyes of Thoth and Ma'at painted in lapis and charcoal, ancient and serene. You do not speak during the ritual. You do not need to. The priests chant in tones both low and endless, voices layered like sediment on stone, repeating phrases that have remained unchanged since the days of your ancestors. A rhythm more than language, a sound that binds one moment to the next in a coil of breath and presence. Your hands remain open at your sides, palms forward, a gesture of receptivity, of humility before the order that governs not only the land and its people, but the heavens above and the realms below. After the final syllables fade into silence, you're offered a simple vessel of cool water, and you sip it slowly, knowing that this act too is ritual, to drink, to live, to receive the blessing of equilibrium. As you exit the chamber, the light outside has deepened, thickened, turned to honeyed bronze and soft plum, casting long shadows from the pillars and statues that line the hallway, their faces now part light, part darkness, as if caught between breath and stillness. The breeze moves gently through the open arches, rustling the fronds of fan palms that line the outer walkways, and from a distance comes the hum of life beyond the palace. Vendors calling out the last of their wares in the market squares, mothers gathering children into their homes, fishermen pulling their nets from the edge of the Nile, where reeds shiver and crocodiles blink without sound. It is then that you return to the royal baths, a hidden chamber beneath the western wing of the palace, lit only by narrow skylights that now glow with the last remnants of day, and you descend into the warmth of the water without assistance. The pool deep and still, its edges made of smooth limestone veined with quartz that catches the fading light in glints of silver and rose. The water envelopes you slowly, like a memory long held, and you pause mid-submersion to feel it entirely. The way it lifts your weight, the way it warms your joints, the way it silences everything beyond your skin. Attendants wait at the edge, their heads bowed, holding oils and unguents, but they do not approach until you signal. And when you do, their hands move with the gentleness of moths, applying scented paste to your shoulders, scrubbing your limbs with pumice softened in honey and myrrh, rinsing your hair with water steeped in mint and crushed flowers gathered before sunrise. You say nothing, and they speak even less, for the silence of this hour is sacred, and even the splash of water against stone seems orchestrated by the gods. When the bath is done, you are wrapped in towels still warm from resting near the brazier, and led slowly back through the torchlit corridor to your private dressing chamber, where a light evening robe awaits, woven of the thinnest linen, dyed a color not quite ivory, not quite dusk, its hem embroidered with symbols of protection, inks with scepters and the eye of Horus, all stitched in thread the color of river silt. You dress without haste, your movements languid and aware, and by the time you re-enter the main hall, the sky outside is turned to violet, then ink, stars now pushing through the ceiling of the world in a slow, deliberate reveal. The evening meal is not a feast, for Pharaoh does not eat in abundance when the land grows quiet. Instead, a simple arrangement of dishes is laid out on a low, round table in the solar court. Roasted leeks, fresh cucumbers sliced and dusted with coriander, a barley cake brushed with olive oil and served with preserved dates, a goblet of pomegranate juice chilled with stones drawn from a mountain stream. And as you sit and eat, alone except for the distant notes of a single-stringed lute played by a musician hidden in a side corridor, the act of nourishment becomes part of your meditation, each bite chewed slowly, each flavor acknowledged, each swallow a grounding in the body, the moment, the now. After the meal, you walk again, not far, just the length of the southern colonnade, and the wind picks up slightly, brushing against the hanging linen panels that ripple like sails along the open gallery, and you pause beneath one of the great statues of Batet, her feline eyes forever fixed on some unseen mystery, her carved ears alert despite their silence. And you place your hand on her paw, as you have since youth, a habit both sentimental and solemn, a gesture that, in your mind, grants you calm, wisdom, and sleep. You move now toward the shrine of your ancestors, a vaulted chamber near the heart of the palace, kept lit always by 5 oil lamps that never burn out, tended day and night by generations of temple caretakers whose names are forgotten, but whose duty is sacred. And you kneel before the stone cartouches of your father and his father before him, your forehead pressed gently to the warm sandstone that carries their names, whispering to them your gratitude, your questions, and your silence, knowing that they too once knelt as you do now, knowing that one day your own name will rest here among them, bathed in flame and memory. You remain there until the air shifts again, until the wind changes and the sounds of the palace grow softer still, and only then do you rise, turning slowly, retracing your steps through the long, narrow hallway lit now by torches whose flames lean gently toward the doorways, as though eager to accompany you into rest. Your bed has been prepared, the canopy drawn, the pillows arranged. The scent in the air is that of cedar and narrowly. Your cat waits, already curled into the crook of the blanket. You remove your robe and slide beneath the linen sheets, the fabric cool against your skin, and you lie there, still, for a long moment, listening, not for danger or duty, but for peace, the distant sound of the Nile lapping against moored boats, the cry of a night heron, the rustle of wind through dry reeds, the heartbeat of a palace that moves even in sleep. You close your eyes, your breathing slows, and the world holds you, not in grandeur, not in ceremony, but in the most sacred thing of all, stillness. Night deepens into something thicker, more velvet than darkness, a textured stillness that seems to cradle not only the palace, but the very bones of the land itself. And as you, Pharaoh, sleep beneath the soft canopy of her linen-covered bed, the world around you folds into itself, sighing gently like a field settling after harvest. The walls of your chamber no longer dividing space, but holding it, cupping it like a pot holds water. The breeze that had earlier slipped through the lattice of the high windows now rests too, content to drift lazily across the carved beams, and the faintly swaying hangings dyed with indigo and ochre, their slow motion mimicking breath or memory, or the subtle movement of dreams themselves as they rise like smoke from the surface of the mind. And though your eyes are closed and your limbs heavy, the world continues its ancient whispering. Footsteps too soft to disturb, servants padding barefoot down halls, with low torches whose flames dance quietly on the smooth walls of rose granite, oil lamps flickering behind alabaster panels carved with scenes of the sun god's journey, their warm light illuminating details only noticed when all else is silent, such as the curve of falcon's wing, or the measured stride of a scribe crossing an etched courtyard. Deep within the palace, where the air grows cooler and the scent of cedarwood lingers strongest, the chamber of the timekeepers remains occupied, and there the keepers of the sacred calendar, priest astronomers trained in solitude and slow seeing, mark the passage of each hour with tiny drops of water falling into polished stone basins, a steady rhythm, precise and eternal, echoing so softly it is barely noticed. Yet it divides the night with such reverence that even time itself seems humbled by their patience. The water clocks, known as clepsydras, do not tick, they do not chime, they do not jar the mind. They simply count, drop by drop, a music only the stars could match, and the priests who tend them read these signs like poets of silence, interpreting not just when dawn will arrive, but when the best moment will come to plant flax, or cleanse the riverbanks, or open the tomb of a noble long buried for purification. Above, on the palace roof, under the same wide night that has blanketed your people for countless generations, another priest traces the constellations with a long rod, aligning the stars with the corners of temples, calculating the angle of Venus in relation to the tombs, muttering soft recitations to himself with the reverent monotone of a man who speaks only to the heavens. And in his mind, he's aligning not only planets, but intentions, prayers, echoes. Beneath him, the royal kitchens are silent save for one low-burning fire where a caretaker prepares a tonic of honey, herbs, and warm wine in case you should stir and request it in the final hours of the night. Though such requests are rare, and usually when they come, are spoken barely above a whisper and received with nods rather than words. Beyond the kitchen wall, the stable hands tend to the sacred chariot horses, their long manes brushed slowly by lamplight, their breathing even and low, the scent of hay and leather strong in the damp evening air, and above them, small bats flit in and out of cracks in the wall, silent guardians of the dusk, their movements too swift to register unless one watches without blinking. Meanwhile, at the riverbank just beyond the last gate, the priestesses of Khnum, god of the potter's wheel and the shaping of the human soul, perform their midnight ablutions, standing waist-deep in the dark waters of the Nile, their bodies glistening with sacred oil, their chants low and rhythmic, offering songs to the river itself, to the mud, to the clay from which life is believed to have been sculpted by divine hands, and their offerings, garlands of papyrus, carved figurines, small cups filled with milk and honey, float downstream gently, lit by flickering flames that reflect off the water like stars adrift, not celestial, but mortal, humble, hopeful. Within your palace, the shrine rooms remain warm with residual incense, their stone altars covered with fresh petals and beads of myrrh, replaced silently after sunset by temple attendants who never speak, only bow, their duty not to be seen or known, but to maintain the dialogue between the living and the divine through the quiet care of sacred spaces. Their gestures are deliberate, wiping each stone with a cloth soaked in rosewater, adjusting the angle of a statue so that its face aligns with the doorway precisely, checking that the offerings left before the gods have not attracted insects or grown stale. And then, having ensured balance, they vanish again into the corridors, their white robes trailing like smoke, their footsteps absorbed by the soft woven reeds beneath them. In your chamber, one servant lingers longer than the rest, the one chosen to remain until the final torch burns down, and she sits near the doorway, not facing you directly, but turned slightly to the side. Her presence, a quiet sentinel. Her task, not only to serve, but to hold the stillness with you, a companion to the quiet, a keeper of peace. Her breathing, so even it seems rehearsed, and yet it is not. It is simply the rhythm of a life lived in service to harmony. Above you, the stars wheel on, unchanged yet ever-changing. Their names murmured centuries ago by sailors, merchants, and farmers whose descendants now serve in your court. Their stories held in these same constellations, passed down not as myth but as maps of belonging. Sapdet, Anu, and the Great. Bark of Ra that sails nightly through the 12 hours of Duat, each hour guarded by serpents, judged by goddesses, and survived only by those who know the proper names, the correct invocations, the order of the gates. And as the night passes its midpoint, the air becomes cooler, the scent of the earth more pronounced, the texture of the linen against your skin subtly shifting as your body exhales again into deeper sleep, your fingers softening, your shoulders fully relaxed, the furrow of your brow released into the serene neutrality of dreamless rest. But though you sleep, the dream world pulses around you. The kingdom of signs and memory, where the image of the heron at dawn, or the sound of a reed flute heard years ago beside the river, might rise unbidden in your mind, not as visions, but as feelings, warmth, security, the weight of your mother's palm against your chest as a child, the scent of sandalwood in the halls of your first temple visit, the wet slap of water against the side of your boyhood boat. Fragments without sequence, without demand, just presence. In this space between conscious and unseen, your soul wanders, not far, not alone. For even in dreams, a pharaoh is accompanied by the spirits of ancestors, by protective deities, by memories dressed as friends, by moments suspended in time and offered like bowls of fruit upon altars of sleep. And as you remain there, undisturbed, unmoved, yet deeply held, the world around you continues to move in its sacred spirals. Temple bells toll quietly from across the river. Fishermen push off from the shore in narrow boats, and nightboards croon into the reeds. And all the while, the heartbeat of Egypt endures beneath it all, slow, eternal, gentle as breath. As the deepest part of night slowly loosens its grip on the land, and the first hints of a pale horizon begin to stir beneath the veil of stars, Egypt lies in a state of suspended stillness, the kind of breathless hush that seems to pulse beneath even the quietest wind. And within your royal chamber, Pharaoh, you remain half asleep, resting in that fragile place between dream and return, where thoughts drift like slow currents and time ceases to matter, where even the cool linen pressed gently to your cheek feels distant and yet deeply known, like the hand of someone you've never met but have always remembered. And the silence of your room is complete save for the occasional soft crackle of oil in a distant lamp, or the slow stretch of the palace cat repositioning itself at your feet. Above you, the blue-painted ceiling of stars, crafted to mimic Nut, the goddess of the sky, appears darker now. The starlight brushed in faded gold beginning to respond ever so faintly to the coming of day, as if the divine canopy above you is preparing, too, for awakening. But there is no rush, no call to rise, only a slow, warm unfolding of consciousness, like the uncoiling of a fern in the cool of morning. And as your breath deepens, your body gradually remembering its weight, your senses begin to sharpen in soft increments. The subtle shift of air as dawn inches forward, the scent of lotus still clinging faintly to the fibers of your robe, the remembered texture of yesterday's scroll. Beneath your fingertips, the echoes of water lapping against stone in the canals beyond the palace wall. In this half-waking state, the memories of countless mornings begin to resurface in layers. 1,000 dawns marked not by novelty, but by their sacred sameness, each one an echo of the one before, yet no less divine for its repetition. Your thoughts travel not as bursts, but as gentle, meandering rivers, turning slowly to the rituals that will follow: the washing, the anointing, the bowing, the measured steps along the painted corridors, and to the faces that wait silently each morning for the return of your presence, not with expectation, but with the calm certainty that you, as Pharaoh, are the anchor of their world, not merely a figure of power, but a still point in the turning wheel of day and night, flood and drought, life and death. Even as you lie still, the palace is stirring, not with noise, but with rhythm. The early priests of Ra waking in silence, drawing lines of coal beneath their eyes to prepare for the light, muttering their first incantations as they don fresh linen robes still warm from the hearth. The kitchen fires kindled again, pots gently lifted, herbs crushed under smooth stones by half-asleep hands that know their duties not by thought, but by muscle, their bodies remembering what the mind need not speak. And in the outer courtyards, water-bearers begin their first rounds, balancing clay jars on their shoulders, their footsteps muffled against the reed mats laid for this very hour. The hounds stir in the shadows, wagging quietly at the passing shapes of familiar servants, while doves begin to coo from the temple rafters, their calls low and rhythmic, like the first fragments of music returning after silence. Farther off, along the Nile, long boats drift into position, guided by soft commands spoken not to break the peace, but to guide it forward, oars barely touching the surface, as if reluctant to disturb the mirrored sky reflected in the black glass of the river. A fisherman lights a lamp and hangs it on the tip of his pole, not for illumination, but to honor Sobuk, the crocodile god of the waters, protector of the river's mysteries and the unseen movements below. Even the crocodiles, massive and ancient, stir quietly in their muddy coves, blinking slowly, indifferent yet attentive, as if they too acknowledge the shifting of the hour. Within the palace library, a lone scribe has already begun his work, seated beneath a hanging oil lamp, carefully copying from one scroll to another, his reed brush dipping in a shallow dish of ink made from charred acacia. His breath slow, his eyes not tired but patient, the act of writing for him less a task than a meditation, each glyph stroked onto the papyrus like a prayer. He pauses only to wipe the nib and stretch his shoulders, then returns to his slow choreography, unaware of anything but the steady rhythm of mind and hand and ink. Elsewhere in the Queen's garden, the dew has begun to collect upon the blue flowers of the morning glory vine, and the gardeners move like shadows among them, lifting blooms gently with their fingers to check for pests, adjusting stones that edge the walkways, murmuring softly to one another about the moon's path or the scent of the fig trees. And in the sanctuary of Batet, where cats prowl lazily among the incense burners, a young acolyte prepares the altar, brushing away the ash from yesterday's offerings, replacing the wilted petals with fresh garlands strung during the night by unseen hands. Jasmine, marigold, pomegranate blossoms, each placed with care and a kind of loving exactness that seems to bring the chamber back to life, not with grandeur, but with balance. Back in your chamber, you shift gently beneath the linen covers, eyes still closed, the warmth of the morning now beginning to press softly against your skin through the stone walls, and the presence of day feels close, not insistent, but inevitable, like a tide brushing the edge of a reed bed. Your hand rests near the edge of the mattress, and in your half-dream you imagine that it touches sand, warm, fine desert sand. And in this imagined texture you remember caravans long past, silks unrolled in the marketplace, dates pressed into your palm by smiling traders, the song of a stringed instrument played beneath a date palm as the stars came out one by one. You breathe in, and the air is full of memory and softness, not the sharpness of waking, but the gentle weight of continuity, of belonging to a time that is not measured in hours, but in seasons, in floods, in harvests, in the long curve of the sun's path across your sky. And you, Pharaoh, are not merely a figure within it. You are the sky, the river, the pulse in the soil, the shadow on the stone, the silence in the temple. You do not rise yet, but the world prepares for you as it always has. The sandal makers have already finished polishing the soft leather straps for your walk across the eastern terrace. The bath attendants have prepared warm water, laced with calendula and cedar. The head priest has already whispered your name to the image of Ra, awakening the god to your coming presence. A robe has been selected, a soft white, brushed with delicate threads of bronze, and beside it, the day's pectoral rests, inlaid with feldspar and onyx, its design echoing the stars above and the grain below. Everything waits, not with urgency, but with sacred readiness. The kingdom does not demand your rise, but welcomes it, as if each corridor, each stair, each beam of light has rehearsed this moment night after night, year after year, across generations. And so, as the stars begin to fade, and the edge of the world brightens just enough to turn the blackness into a deep navy hue, you stir again, your body knowing what your mind has not yet asked, and the hush of the palace bows in reverence. Not loudly, not even visibly, but with the gentle turn of energies aligned, the subtle shift of rhythm, the quiet knowing that the sun will rise, the Pharaoh will walk, and Egypt, eternal, dreaming, radiant, will breathe again. The sun has finally breached the horizon, not with haste, but with ceremony, its golden light spreading across the land like a soft balm, washing over the fields, the waters, and the rooftops of the slumbering city beyond your palace walls. And as its rays touch the carved limestone of your private chamber, the warm glow settles across your face, not to wake you abruptly, but to invite you gently into the presence of morning. A return not only to consciousness, but to your role as Pharaoh, the living vessel of Ma'at, the keeper of balance and breath in the two lands. And as you rise, slow and composed, the linen sheets rustling like reeds in a soft breeze, your limbs stretch not with fatigue, but with gratitude, as if your body recognizes the gift of another day within this eternal rhythm of sun and sand, of stone and shadow, and even before your feet touch the polished floor. The air is already rich with the scent of new beginnings. Sweet marjoram carried in by the morning wind, a faint trace of bread baking somewhere in the lower courtyards, and the comforting warmth of oil lamps still glowing from the last hours of night. The attendants, already waiting beyond the curtain, hear the shift of cloth and the rhythm of your movement, and without a word, they enter, heads bowed, eyes soft, feet bare, carrying robes of white linen folded into geometric perfection, bowls of water still steaming with rose petals and eucalyptus, and small clay jars of kohl, myrrh, and scented balms to anoint the body and prepare it for the day ahead. You move among them with calm familiarity, offering no commands, for they already know, they always know, which sandal fits which foot, which jewel rests over which bone, which scent steadies your breath, and which oils cool the heat of day before it even begins. The washing ritual is quiet, sacred, and slow, with no more sound than the splash of water in the stone basins, the soft scrape of a pumice stone across your heels, and the whisper of cloth drawn gently across your shoulders. You close your eyes as cool water trails down your arms, and for a moment, you feel less like a sovereign and more like the desert after rain, absorbing, waiting, transformed. The robe is placed over your shoulders in perfect alignment, each fold falling where it should, the fabric almost translucent in the morning light, and over it, the pectoral of a day is secured, a square of beaten gold inlaid with turquoise and lapis lazuli, depicting the winged scarab, a symbol of the rising sun and rebirth, a reminder that even gods begin their journey anew each dawn. Once dressed, you are led through the inner passageways, not to the public court yet, but first to the chapel of the horizon, a small but exquisitely adorned space lined with sunstones that shimmer with captured light, where only you and a handful of chosen priests gather to greet Ra at the start of each morning. The ritual here is older than memory, and every movement carries a weight far beyond its gesture. The lighting of the incense, the opening of the eastward window, the slow raising of arms in unison, all to invite the divine presence to rise once more and fill the kingdom with order and clarity. No words are wasted. The chant is minimal, almost whispered, for the rising sun itself is the true prayer. And as you raise your hands and feel the first warmth fall across your palms, you understand, as every Pharaoh before you did, that this daily moment is not performance, but communion. When the rite concludes and the priests withdraw, you remain for a short while longer, alone but not lonely, listening to the birds outside the window beginning their calls, the rustle of the papyrus growing in the water garden below, and the faint, high laughter of children rising from the servant quarters as they prepare for their lessons. These small, distant sounds weaving themselves into the larger tapestry of your world. Unspoken affirmations that the land is at peace, that your people wake with rhythm in their steps and food in their bellies. Eventually, you step into the open corridor that leads to the Hall of Petitioners, your sandals tapping softly on the white tiles etched with scenes from the Book of the Day. And as you pass each painted column, you are reminded of stories taught to you as a child. Tales of Ammonius' gift to the warrior king, of Thoth's counsel to the scribe who could not speak, of Sekhmet's tears falling into the Nile and creating the first red lotus. And these images are not decoration, but memory carved in. Pigment and plaster, lessons not to be forgotten. When you enter the hall, sunlight now streaming fully through the high arches, your court rises in silence, each member bowing low as you pass. Officials draped in measured robes, scribes clutching tablets of reed, messengers from Nubia and Byblos waiting patiently for your time, and nobles with requests about land, irrigation, taxes, or blessings. You take your seat beneath the great canopy woven with gold thread and fixed with silver stars, and the audience begins, not with flourish but with gentle pacing. The scribe announcing the names, the concerns, the locations, the reasons. And you, Pharaoh, listen not as a judge, but as a steward, as a caretaker of balance, responding with gestures, with nods, with slow, thoughtful words that ripple outward through your ministers and into the lives of farmers, craftsmen, fishermen, and mothers. Far from these halls, some matters are routine. Requests for laborers to aid in a harvest, permission to divert a portion of water from a canal, disputes over property lines, and others are heavier, involving dreams of omens, illness in a temple, or reports of jackals seen where none should be. For each, you offer your attention fully, knowing that for the petitioner, this moment is sacred and your presence, your eye, your word, is their tether to the divine. And yet, amidst the gravity of governance, there are moments of quiet joy, too. A young child offering a carved figurine of a falcon, her hands trembling as she steps forward, or a village elder bringing bread baked from a grain, said to be blessed by Osiris. And though these gifts are small, they are met with the same reverence you offer all things. A gentle nod, a soft word of blessing, the recognition that greatness lives not only in temples and tombs, but in each folded loaf and hand. Chiseled toy. As the sun climbs higher and the shadows shorten, the hall begins to empty, the audience concludes, and you rise once more, not in fatigue, but with the quiet fulfillment of having held space for your people, of having met the day not with command, but with presence. And as you step back into the sunlight, you exhale, feeling the coolness of a passing breeze lift the hem of your robe. And in that breath, long, slow, aware, the fullness of morning settles into your bones, steady and sacred. As the heat of the sun settles gently into the stones beneath your sandals, and the angle of light changes ever so slightly across the palace's eastern walls, you, Pharaoh, make your way toward the house of instruction. Not in haste, not with ceremony, but in the same deliberate calm that governs all the rhythms of the day. The rustling of your linen robes the only audible trace of movement as you pass through corridors veiled in shadows and light, where murals stretch along the plastered surfaces, painted centuries ago and yet as vivid now as if they had been brushed only yesterday. Scenes of scribes at work, of the lotus blooming at dawn, of young initiates poring over sacred texts while the gods hover above them in silent witness. And the air here smells faintly of old papyrus and cedar ink, of chalk dust and sweet acacia, a perfume of knowledge and continuity untouched by the voices of the outer court. The house of instruction is not just a library, nor only a school. It is a temple of the mind, a sanctuary for scholars and pre-scribes who have devoted their lives to the slow and deliberate unfolding of wisdom. And here, among rows of low benches and sun-drenched tables, beneath lattice skylights that filter the brightness into pale gold, the keepers of the written word await you, not with anxiety or flourish, but with the quiet pride of those whose work is measured not in hours, but in generations. You step onto the cool tiles, and heads bow in unison. The chief lector priest rises to greet you, holding in his hands a bound scroll of pale reed fiber, wrapped in linen and sealed with your own cartouche, a document transcribed over many days, its glyphs etched with utmost precision. And as he places it into your hands, the weight of the scroll feels both symbolic and physical, not heavy, but grounding, like holding the bones of a truth too old for speech. You take your seat at the high platform, not distant from the others, but elevated slightly so that your view stretches out across the open reading room. And for a long moment you do nothing but listen, not to voices, for none are speaking, but to the soft scratch of reed pens upon fresh scrolls, the careful rustle of pages being turned, the occasional cough muffled respectfully, the footsteps of apprentices bringing in new bundles of papyrus, and the distant murmur of wind moving through the open slats above. These are the sounds of thought, of preservation, of eternity written line by line, and in this quiet you find a peace that exists nowhere else, not even in your own chamber, not in the temple's highest sanctum, not at the river's edge, a peace born of repetition, of quiet minds devoted to delicate labor. One of the scribes approaches with a small tablet, a record of rainfall patterns from the last 5 years, cross-referenced with harvest yields and lunar observations. And as you examine it, you run your fingers over the etched lines, the cool surface warmed by the scribe's hand, the marks so fine and precise they seem less written and more whispered into stone. You nod in approval, not with words, but with a soft motion of the hand. And the scribe bows again, returning to his place like a ripple fading back into stillness. The lector priest speaks at last, his voice no louder than a breeze through reeds, updating you on the progress of the copyists assigned to the Amduat, the sacred text describing the sun god's journey through the underworld. It is a demanding task, one that requires not only flawless writing, but a deep understanding of symbolism, structure, and sacred timing. And the work has taken longer than expected due to the season's heat, which has made the inks dry too quickly and the pigments difficult to bind. Yet still, progress is being made, and 3 new panels are now complete, ready for placement in the tomb of the high priest who passed during the last flood season. You listen, absorbing the report, not as a task to be judged, but as a symphony to be understood. The labor of hands and hearts stretching across time, working not for acclaim, but for alignment with the divine order. You rise then, slowly, and begin a quiet walk through the rows of students seated on the cool stone floor, their heads bowed over their wax tablets, practicing glyphs that will take years to master, each stroke carved with care, their small hands smudged with soot and oil. They look up only briefly as you pass, eyes wide, expressions reverent, some too young yet to grasp the full weight of your presence, but all sensing it, like the feeling of the sun before it clears the horizon. You stop, beside one who has written the name of Thoth with unusual elegance, and with the tip of your finger, you trace the outline of the ibis-headed god, then press your thumb gently into the wax, leaving your mark. A gesture that will be remembered by this child for the rest of his days, passed down perhaps to his own apprentices one day, as a moment when the veil between the human and the divine felt thin enough to touch. You returned to your seat, and for a while longer, you read, not decrees or dispatches, but poetry, old verses recorded by scribes centuries before your reign, lines that speak of the flood and the moon, of the hawks circling the tombs of kings, of a woman's laughter in a courtyard beneath a fig tree. And as you read, the voice in your mind slows, softens, becomes almost not your own, as if the rhythm of the poem becomes a breath you are simply inhabiting, not producing. Outside, the day hums on, and yet within these walls, time behaves differently. Less a line than a circle, less a stream than a still pool. And though the noon hour nears, the world beyond the library feels distant, not forgotten, but softened, as though viewed through a gauze of memory. A servant appears with a tray, a small bowl of crushed pomegranate, chilled with snow carried down from the hills beyond Thebes, a vessel of barley water sweetened with wildflower honey. And you accept it with a nod, savoring each sip slowly, each mouthful grounding you in the simple acts of life, nourishment, stillness. Then, with a final glance at the lector priest and a quiet word of thanks spoken not aloud, but offered in posture and gaze, you leave the house of instruction, the hem of your robe brushing over sunlit dust motes caught in the afternoon air. And as you walk back through the corridor of painted stories, the images seem somehow deeper now, as though your time among the scribes has made their meaning stir anew. The falcon taking flight, the scribe laying down his pen, the goddess stretching forth, her arms to embrace the world, all of them alive in pigment, alive in you, alive in the endless day. As the long golden afternoon wanes into a softer, honeyed light, and the air in the palace begins to cool with the promise of evening, your return to the inner sanctum is as quiet and fluid as all movements of the day have been. Not a conclusion, not a departure, but a gentle turning, as if the sun itself, having lit the world with such patience, now begins to bow in deference to the night, casting long shadows across the tiled floors and gilded colonnades, drawing silhouettes from palms and statues and flowing linen into delicate patterns that shimmer on the walls like painted thought. And you, Pharaoh, feeling the slow ache of the sun's journey mirrored in your own bones, make your way down the broad, shaded corridor past carved reliefs of victorious hunts and sacred festivals, your pace steady but no longer measured, no longer ceremonial, simply present, walking as yourself, beneath the weight and ease of kingship, returning not only to your chamber, but to a sacred stillness that belongs to no one but you. The servants do not speak as they open the tall wooden doors of your private quarters, doors inlaid with tamarisk and ivory, burnished smooth by generations of careful hands, and within, the air is dim and cool, thick with the scent of lotus, blue chamomile, and the last faint drift of frankincense from the offering made earlier in the small household shrine to Hathor. And here, In this room lined with sun-washed drapes and painted ceiling stars is your cocoon, your refuge from the weight of judgment, from scrolls and rituals and the layers of a divine mask. For this is where you remove the crown and lay down the crook and flail, where no titles echo and no torches blaze, only the amber light of twilight seeping through the open lattice, only the slow movement of time caught in woven textures and soft footfalls. The bath has been drawn for you already, deep and warm, strewn with petals and oils, and as you step into it, the water closes around your body with the tender gravity of sleep itself, supporting you, holding you, as though you were slipping into the arms of the Nile once more. Not the rushing flood of high season, but the calm backwater pools that form behind temple walls and flow around the roots of sacred fig trees, where herons wade and fish flicker in the reeds. And just for this moment, with eyes half closed and breath slowing, you are not Pharaoh, not God on earth, but a soul afloat, formless and light. A soft cloth runs along your back, guided by the hands of a trusted servant whose silence is its own kind of reverence. And the water carries away the dust of the court, the ink from scrolls, the weight of sandals and pectorals and eyes that watched all day. It washes you not just clean, but clear, a vessel returned to stillness, ready to receive whatever dreams the night might offer. When you rise from the bath, your body warm and loose as river clay. The linen robe placed over your shoulders is cool and dry, fragrant with myrtle, its fibers softened from many washings, and the bedding, turned down with care, is smooth and waiting, the low lamp casting golden ripples across the floor like reflections on water. A small tray has been left on the side table. Figs soaked in honey, slivers of fresh date, a cup of warm barley milk sweetened with carob, a soothing evening tonic, known for its power to ease the chest and quiet the mind. And as you take a slow sip, seated in silence beside the open window, the world outside hums with soft life. The evening calls of nightjars drifting from the orchard, the quiet splash of a tortoise moving through the irrigation channel, the rhythmic thump of pestles from distant kitchens where final meals are being ground and stirred for those who still walk in wakefulness. And farther off, past the palace grounds and the low white walls, beyond the market where the last baskets are being stacked and stall cloths folded, beyond the courtyards where laughter from children begins to fade into lullabies, past even the temples and the sleeping tombs, the stars have begun to kindle one by one. Sopped at first, brilliant and precise, then Sa and the long arc of Orion, and then the small clustered lights of the seven sisters who, it is said, guard the dreams of the young, and carry the thoughts of the aged back into the world of the gods. The wind is tender now, moving through the window like a whispered song, catching the edge of your robe and the thin curtain just enough to remind you that even in stillness, the world breathes, the world turns, and your breath moves with it. Deep now, slow, measured like the pulse of time itself. A servant enters with one last offering, a small ivory box containing the night balm, a mixture of lavender, blue lotus, and beeswax to be pressed gently beneath your nose and at the base of your neck. And as it is applied with calm fingers, you feel the cooling kiss of oil soothe your skin, the scent rising like a soft cloud, an invitation to rest deeper, to go inward, to release. The servant bows, and you nod in return, the unspoken understanding of ritual performed not for show, but for sacred necessity. And then you lie back on the bed, its layers of linen and wool cradling you like the banks of the Nile cradle the basin at flood season, enfolding you in warmth, in memory, in peace. Overhead, the painted stars gleam with faint traces of gold leaf, and though the light in the room is dim, they seem to shimmer with their own quiet fire, arranged just as they are in the sky above, a mirror of the cosmos, as if you were not inside a room, but floating beneath the heavens themselves. And beneath those stars, with your hands resting gently on your chest and your eyes growing heavy, the final echoes of the day slip away. The chants, the sandals, the voices, the decisions, they fall like petals in the still water, making no ripples, only quiet, only calm. In this last moment before sleep claims you fully, your thoughts drift, not in words but in images. The slow bloom of the lotus at dawn, the circle traced by a scribe's hand, the glint of sunlight on a bronze brazier, the way a priest whispered your name in a flame at sunrise, the way a young boy traced a glyph with wonder in his eyes, the coolness of the stone in the house of instruction, the warm pressure of a servant's hand as she guided you to the bath, and all of it comes together not as a story, but as a feeling, a sensation of presence, of lineage, of belonging, of eternity moving through you, quietly like water. You're not Pharaoh now. You're not ruler. You're not divine. You're simply breath and blood, sleep and silence, a living note in a song too old to be heard, yet always known. And now let your thoughts wander. I'll see you in another timeline. Good night.